In the spring of 1935, in a cigar factory in Havana, a man climbed onto a wooden platform, opened a French novel, and began to read aloud. Below him, dozens of workers rolled tobacco in complete silence. No radio, no conversation, just his voice and the soft sound of leaves being shaped by hand. The book he was reading was the Count of Monte Cristo. And before that year was over, the story of a wronged sailor who lost everything and returned as a legend would give its name to a cigar. Not just any cigar, the one that would become the best-selling handmade cigar on the face of the earth. This is the story of Montecristo, and it begins, strangely enough, not with tobacco, but with reading. To understand how a novel could name a cigar, you have to understand one of the most beautiful traditions ever invented inside a workplace. In 1865, a cigar worker and journalist named Saturnino Martinez had an idea that sounds impossible today. Rolling cigars is silent, repetitive, precise work. The hands are busy, but the mind is free. So why not fill that silence with words? The workers themselves paid for it. Each roller gave a small piece of his own wages, and together they hired a professional reader, a lector. He sat on a raised platform above the gallery, like a preacher above a congregation, and he read. In the morning, the newspapers, politics, baseball, news from Spain and New York. And in the afternoon, novels, great ones, Zola, Cervantes, Victor Hugo, and again, one novel above all others, Alexandre Dumas, The Count of Monte Cristo. The rollers didn't just listen, they voted on which books would be read. They debated them over lunch.
And when a chapter ended well, they showed their approval the only way they could without stopping their hands. They rapped their rolling knives, their chivetas, against the wooden tables. A factory full of blades, applauding a book. And if a lector read badly or chose poorly, that same sound could turn against him, slow and hollow, the gallery's way of booing. A good lector was part actor, part teacher, part newscaster, and he was paid better than many of the rollers who hired him because they considered his voice worth the money. Think about what this created. Cigar rollers became some of the best-read workers in the world, many of them without ever learning to read themselves. They knew their Dickens, their Hugo, their Cervantes, the way other workers knew drinking songs. When Cuban rollers emigrated to Key West and Tampa in the late 1800s, they brought the lector with them, and American cigar factories filled with the sound of novels in Spanish. 2 Cuban brands would eventually be named by books read from that platform. One of them was Romeo y Julieta. The other is the subject of this film. Now hold that image, because in July of 1935, a businessman named Alonso Menendez bought a small Havana factory called Particulares and decided to launch a brand of his own. He wanted a name with weight, a name with story. He didn't have to look far. The story goes that down on the rolling floor, the lector. The workers loved that book, the way people today love a great series finale. And so the new cigar was named after it, Montecristo. A cigar named not by a marketing department, but by literature, named in a very real sense by the workers themselves. What happened next happened fast. A year later, Menendez joined forces with José Manuel Garcia, known to everyone as Pepe, and the firm of Menendez y Garcia was born. In 1937, they did something audacious. They bought the H. Upmann factory, one of the most prestigious houses in all of Cuba, and moved Montecristo production inside its walls. A brand that was 2 years old now lived in a palace of cigar history. And here comes one of the strangest details in this entire story. The logo. That triangle of 6 crossed swords surrounding a fleur-de-lis printed in brown and red. It might be the most recognized symbol in the entire world of tobacco. It looks ancient. It looks profoundly Cuban. It was designed in London. Montecristo's British distributor, the firm of John Hunter Morris and Elkin, created the emblem to sell the cigar to the world. The swords evoked the duels and vengeance of the novel. The design was so simple and so strong that it has barely changed in 90 years. The cigars themselves were just as radical in their simplicity. While other brands offered dozens of poetically named shapes, Montecristo launched with a numbered range. No 1, no 2, no 3, no 4, no 5. That was it. Clean, confident, almost modern before modern existed. And out of that little numbered family came 2 giants.
The number 4, a small petite Corona, would in time become the single best-selling handmade cigar size in the world, the everyday masterpiece. Che Guevara was famously said to favor it. And then there is the number 2.
A torpedo, a pyramid of tobacco that narrows to a perfect point. It is one of the most difficult shapes in the entire craft. A straight-sided cigar can be finished with a mold and a steady hand. A pyramid cannot. The head must be sculpted leaf by leaf, tapering perfectly, sealed perfectly, by fingers that have done it tens of thousands of times. Only torcedores of the highest category are allowed to touch it. And the shape is not just for show. As the cigar narrows, it concentrates the smoke, so the flavor tightens and intensifies as you go, cocoa and coffee and cedar drawing slowly to a point. Ask a room full of serious smokers to name the most iconic Cuban cigar ever made, and you will hear those 2 words again and again: Montecristo No. 2. All of it built on tobacco from one place, Vuelta Abajo, in the far west of Cuba, the same small kingdom of soil that feeds every great Habano. Sun-grown leaf for strength, shade-grown wrapper for silk, fermented, aged, and married into the medium-bodied signature that made Montecristo the definition of what people imagine when they imagine a Cuban cigar. Not the strongest, not the rarest, the standard, the reference point every other cigar is measured against. By the late 1950s, Menendez y Garcia had built the largest cigar business in Cuba. Montecristo wasn't just successful, it was the engine of Cuban cigar exports. And then, in the space of a single season, all of it ended. In September of 1960, the revolutionary government nationalized the Cuban tobacco industry. The factories, the warehouses, the aging tobacco, the ledgers, the brand itself. Everything Menendez and Garcia had spent 25 years building was taken in a matter of days. Not sold, not negotiated, taken. Imagine that morning.
The same rolling galleries, the same tables, the same lector's platform, and a piece of paper declaring that none of it belongs to you anymore. The founders left the island with their experience, their reputations, and a name they were no longer allowed to use. And here the real story becomes almost indistinguishable from the novel that started it. Like Edmond Dantes, they had been stripped of everything that carried their name by forces far larger than themselves. And like Edmond Dantes, they refused to disappear. They went first to the Canary Islands, and there they began to roll again. They could not use the name Montecristo. It no longer legally belonged to them in most of the world. So they made a cigar for the Dunhill Company and called it Montecruz. Say it out loud. Montecruz. It is Montecristo with the wound still showing. A brand name as an act of memory. Meanwhile, the family's story and the industry around it flowed onward to the Dominican Republic, and in time a second Montecristo rose there, made for the American market, where the Cuban original could not legally be sold. Which is why, today, there are 2 Montecristos on this planet. Walk into a shop in Madrid, London, or Havana, and Montecristo means a Cuban cigar made by Habanos. Walk into a shop in Miami or New York, and Montecristo means a Dominican cigar wearing the same crossed swords. Same name, same emblem, different soil, different seeds, different hands, different smoke. The Dominican versions lean on Dominican fillers and their own wrapper traditions, built for the American palate. The Cuban versions remain pure Vuelta Abajo. Neither is a fake. Both are legal, both are real, and each side of the ocean insists it carries the true spirit of 1935.
It is one of the strangest situations in the entire world of luxury goods. Imagine 2 companies on 2 islands, both legally selling Rolex watches forever. That is Montecristo. And fame, as always in this world, has a shadow. Because the Cuban No. 2 is one of the most desired cigars on earth, it is also one of the most counterfeited. The street corner deal, the too perfect box, the glass top case of pyramids at an impossible price. If a Montecristo finds you on vacation, instead of you finding it in a licensed shop, be careful. Legends attract forgers. They always have. And in Cuba, the brand the founders left behind did not fade, it exploded. The old H. Upmann factory was renamed after José Martí, and inside it, Montecristo became the best-selling Habano in the world.
For decades, it has been said that of all the Cuban cigars smoked on Earth, a remarkable share of them wear that little brown and red band. When someone smokes their first real Cuban cigar, odds are it is a Montecristo No. 4. Walk into a Cuban cigar factory today, this morning, and you will still find a lector on the platform, still the newspaper before lunch, still a novel in the afternoon, still the sound of chivetas rapping on the tables when the chapter lands. Cuba has proposed the tradition as a piece of world cultural heritage, and whether or not it ever receives the title, the rollers already know what it is. It is the soul of the factory. Machines took over almost every other product on Earth, but you cannot read a novel to a machine. So the next time you see that band, the 6 swords and the fleur-de-lis, look a little closer. Most people see a luxury logo. You now see a library. You see a reader on a wooden platform and 100 silent artisans living inside a story while their hands build something the world would come to treasure. You see a family that lost everything in a single September and answered the way the Count answered, not with surrender, but with patience, craft, and return. Edmond Dantes escaped his prison, found his treasure, and took a new name that made him immortal. The men of 1935 did exactly the same. The treasure was tobacco. The new name was Montecristo, and that is a story worth smoking slowly.